Hello, this is Gihan Perera. I often talk about AI, but today I'm going to demonstrate some AI, a new AI application which I think is quite amazing and has lots of applications at work, at home, in classrooms. There are lots of different ways that we could use this. And it comes down to the concept of digital notebooks. So you might be using some sort of application on your phone or your laptop for gathering information. So if you're on your phone, iPhone has a Notes app. If you're using the Microsoft Suite, you might be using OneNote. There are other tools like Evernote and Notion, a whole bunch of things where the idea is that it's a way for you to gather information. So you could put into a notebook you could put photos in there, you could put handwritten notes that you've taken, that you've scanned, you could upload documents, you could copy and paste, and the idea is just to organize your digital life in these ways that you've conveniently got this information for later. Now, many of these tools have now become AI enabled as well, so that you can, whatever you've uploaded, you can ask AI questions about it, it can summarize and so on. That's pretty good, and that alone is good. Google had a thing called Google Keep, which was for things like this. It was okay, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as some of these other tools. But now Google have released a tool called Google Notebook LM. So LM is for language model. It's a terrible name, but Google's always been terrible with naming. And it operates in a similar way. So you can create these notebooks, and in those notebooks you can just put documents. They've text documents, PDF documents, and so on. And it has a standard, what we now think of standard, AI tools attached to it. So you can chat with the notes, with the documents that you've uploaded. You could ask it to do a summary and so on. And so those are the sort of things that in the last couple of years we've been expecting AI to be able to do. But this Google Notebook LM has one new amazing feature, and you might think of it as jaw-dropping or gobsmacking or mind-blowing. The idea is that when you upload some notes into a notebook, you can press a button, and then after a few minutes, so the AI will analyze the notes that you've uploaded there, and it will generate a two-person conversation, an audio conversation of two people who are discussing the content of what's in there. It's like listening to a podcast where you've got two people talking about a topic. They go back and forth. It's very conversational. If you didn't know it was AI generated, you probably wouldn't guess because it sounds very realistic. So you can imagine that you could use this for the documents that you're interested in, have a conversation about these documents. So for example, you could take a company's annual report, upload it into a notebook, and then you could have two people have a conversation about this company based on their annual report. You could, in classrooms, there could be reports and whole textbook chapters that could be uploaded, and then there's a conversation about some topic. You could imagine that you're working on some documents, and you putting them into this notebook, and then you press a button and you have this conversation about what you're working on, even if it's drafts. So I did this with all the blog posts that I've written recently about AI. I've put them all into this notebook, and then asked the Google AI to generate a conversation around that. And it generated quite a well-structured conversation around this random collection of blog posts. You can imagine if this was around last year at the time of the voice referendum, you could upload the Constitution and upload the text from different viewpoints from the yes and no campaign, and then it would generate a podcast kind of conversation about that content. So I think there's some amazing applications, and what I've got for you here is one thing that I did was I took my book, Disruption by Design, and I took the PDF version of that, uploaded it into one of these notebooks, pressed the button, and then in a few minutes I had this back and forth conversation between two people discussing the content of the book. And I've got this for you here. So I'm now going to sign off and leave you in the hands of Google and this conversation. But before I do that, let me just say that as you listen to this, of course you can listen to the content in the book that these two AI people are discussing, and you could talk about how amazing the book is and how great the author is, but also listen to at two other levels. So one is just listen to what is done. I didn't give it any direction. I've just uploaded the PDF document and it's created this realistic conversation between two people. So that's the first thing, just to see how advanced AI has become now. And the second thing is to think about applications that you can use for yourself. So it could be in your work life where you're thinking about documents that complex documents that you'd love to have a summary of, but an audio summary or people discussing it like a podcast episode. You could think about it for your kids, where they're studying something at school and they've got this document, which or report or some information which is quite complex. And imagine if you could upload it, and then they would have a 10-minute audio conversation between two people talking about that topic. Oh, and one other thing before I leave you in the hands of Google, if you, after listening to that, if you'd like a copy of the book Disruption by Design, then just get in touch with me, email, send me a text, find me on LinkedIn and just request it, and I'll happily send you a digital copy of the book Disruption by Design. So I'm now going to leave you in the hands of Google. I think you'll be amazed. I certainly was, and I hope you can think of ways that you can use this. I'll see you in the future.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into Disruption by Design by Gihan Perera. You've got some big goals navigating this wild world of constant change and maybe even leveraging disruption to your advantage. Well, you picked the right book. This one is packed with actionable insights ready to get started.
Absolutely. Perera doesn't just explain disruption. He gives you a toolkit to actually use it.
Yeah.
Let's unlock those aha moments together.
Okay, let's unpack Perera's challenge right off the bat, challenging the status quo. He talks about how established companies, even successful ones, can get tripped up by their past strengths. They become blind spots.
It's like that saying, what got you here won't get you there. Perera uses a great example to illustrate this: UPS, FedEx, and Amazon. Remember what happened there?
Oh, absolutely. UPS was the king of package delivery, built on this massive network of trucks and drivers, right? That was their superpower for decades.
Until FedEx came in with a totally different approach: air delivery. Suddenly, UPS's strength, all those trucks became a liability. They couldn't match FedEx's speed for overnight shipping.
And then Amazon swoops in, and they don't even try to compete on the same level. They tap into the gig economy using independent contractors for same-day, even 2-hour delivery. Talk about flipping the script.
The takeaway here is that your biggest strength can quickly become your biggest weakness if you're not constantly scanning the horizon for change. What worked yesterday might not cut it tomorrow. So think about your own work. Is there something you're clinging to that might be holding you back?
It's so easy to get stuck in that "this is how we've always done it" mindset. Perera calls for a shift from what was to what could be. He introduces the idea of a possibility thinker. Love that. Someone who sees change and gets excited, not scared.
And that ties into a really important point: embracing uncertainty. Most of us are hardwired to focus on risks, on what could go wrong, but that can make us miss opportunities hidden within those changes.
He tells a great story about self-driving cars. Remember when they first came out, adults were all, whoa, that's kind of scary. But kids were like, cool, can it drive itself to school? That childlike curiosity helps us see the possibilities instead of just the obstacles.
Exactly. It's about asking what if instead of no way. Have you encountered a recent change that you initially saw as a threat, but then realized it held an opportunity?
Definitely. It's amazing how often that happens when you shift your perspective, isn't it?
Okay, next up is a big one. Focus on the problem. The customer is key. Perera emphasizes solving real customer problems, not just building something cool and hoping they'll buy it. Right. It's easy to get caught up in our own ideas, but we have to make sure we're building things people actually need. Perera talks about Kenneth Shinazuka, a teenager who invented smart socks to help his grandfather with Alzheimer's.
That's right. Kenneth's aunt, who was caring for his grandfather, was constantly worried about him wandering off at night. So at just 15 years old, Kenneth creates socks with sensors that send an alert to his aunt's phone if his grandfather gets out of bed. Incredible.
He saw a genuine need and created a solution that addressed it directly. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most innovative solutions come from empathy and observation.
It makes you wonder, are we truly solving our customer's biggest problem or just offering a convenient solution to a smaller one? Could we be aiming higher?
This is where the difference between incremental improvements and quantum leaps comes in. Perera argues that sometimes radical change is actually more efficient than trying to catch up step by step.
He uses the example of self-driving cars again. Instead of just making better gas-powered cars, imagine rethinking transportation from the ground up. A world where cars drive themselves would transform everything.
Of course, those leaps come with more risk and uncertainty, but Perera points out that clinging to incremental steps in a rapidly changing world might be even riskier in the long run.
So are we playing it safe when we could be making bolder moves? What seemingly impossible leap could transform your field if you threw out all the assumptions? That's something to think about as we move into the next part, where Pereira dives into practical tools for actually navigating this disruption. All right, we're back. We've talked about challenging assumptions and embracing the possibilities disruption brings. But how do we actually do that? Pereira gives us a practical roadmap in part 2, and it all starts with expanding our field of vision.
He calls it scanning wide. It's about becoming incredibly attuned to the signals of change, those subtle things that often foreshadow major disruptions. Perera offers a bunch of techniques for this, and one that I find particularly useful is the helicopter view.
Ooh, tell me more about that one. I'm all about getting a fresh perspective.
It's about stepping outside our immediate roles, our day-to-day tasks, and looking at the bigger picture. Imagine you're a brand new CEO of your company. What are the first things you change? Or think about your industry as a whole. What are the blind spots that people on the inside might miss?
That reminds me of that story Pereira tells about Intel. The executives did this exercise where they imagined they were a brand new board of directors looking at the company for the first time. And they realized that their reliance on memory chips in a market dominated by Japanese competitors was a huge vulnerability.
Exactly. Sometimes we get so stuck in our own ways of thinking that we miss the obvious. Perez's point is that bringing in outside perspectives, even if it's just through a thought experiment, can really shake things up.
So helicopter view is about challenging our assumptions. What other scanning techniques does he recommend?
He talks about mapping out the future customer journey. Don't assume that today's customers will be the same tomorrow. What if a new technology emerges or a competitor introduces a game-changing product? How will that impact your customer's experience?
It's like taking your current customer journey map and running it through a bunch of what-if scenarios. That's such a helpful exercise.
Absolutely. And he also reminds us that the world is constantly speeding up, hierarchies are flattening, and the cost of technology is dropping. He calls it fast, flat, and free. Anything that's slow, bumpy, or expensive is vulnerable to disruption.
That makes me think of the taxi industry. They were so slow to adapt to new technology, so stuck in their old ways of doing things. And then Uber and Lyft came along, offering a faster, cheaper, more convenient experience.
Yeah. The taxi industry is a classic example of what happens when you ignore the fast, flat, and free principle. Pereira's point is that we need to constantly be asking ourselves, where are we slow, bumpy, or expensive? How could a disruptor exploit those weaknesses?
It's like we're in a race against time, and we have to keep innovating just to stay in the game. But Pereira also emphasizes the importance of looking outside our own fields for inspiration.
Right. He wants us to be a connector to look for ideas and technologies in other industries that we can borrow and adapt. Remember our earlier discussion about self-driving cars. Think about how their impact goes way beyond the automotive industry.
Totally. We talk about how self-driving cars could revolutionize logistics, urban planning, healthcare, even elder care. It's about seeing those connections, those ripple effects that extend outward from any given innovation.
And finally, Perera emphasizes the importance of conducting a thorough PESTLE analysis. Political, economics, social, technological, legal, and environmental. It's a way to systematically identify external factors that could impact our future.
It's like having a radar system for disruption, constantly scanning the environment for potential threats and opportunities. Okay, we've scanned wide, we've gathered a ton of information. Now what? How do we make sense of it all and start making decisions?
That's where Perera guides us through the process of narrowing down, making smart choices. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the possibilities, but he provides some really helpful frameworks. For example, he reminds us that there's rarely just a single right answer.
Right, he calls it infinite choice. We almost always have more options than we initially consider. It reminds me of that story he tells about the student who was asked to calculate the height of a building using a barometer.
Oh, I love that story. Instead of just using the standard physics formula, the student came up with a whole bunch of creative alternatives, like measuring the building's shadow or dropping the barometer from the roof and timing how long it took to hit the ground.
It's a great reminder to think outside the box. We often limit ourselves to the first two solutions that come to mind, when in reality, There's a whole spectrum of possibilities.
Absolutely. And once you've expanded your options, Perera offers a simple but powerful principle for prioritizing them. Why before how?
Oh, I like that one. Tell me more.
It's about focusing on the why of a goal before getting bogged down in the how. Don't let perceived difficulty stop you from pursuing something truly worthwhile. Start by asking yourself, why is this important? What value would this create? What impact would this have?
It's a great way to cut through the noise and focus on what really matters. I can see how that would be helpful when you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed.
Definitely. And speaking of feeling overwhelmed, Pereira also recognizes that we don't have to figure everything out on our own. He's a big advocate for seeking out diverse perspectives and tapping into collective intelligence.
That's so important, especially in today's world where no one person can be an expert on everything.
Exactly. Pereira introduces this fascinating method called the Delphi method for gathering and refining expert opinions. It's a structured approach to ensure that diverse viewpoints are considered and that the final decision is more robust.
It's like crowdsourcing wisdom. Instead of just going with your gut or relying on the loudest voice in the room, you're systematically gathering insights from multiple perspectives.
Exactly. And finally, Pereira cautions us against getting caught up in hype. It's so easy to get swept away by the latest trends, especially with technology. But he reminds us to look for concrete evidence and data to support our decisions.
It's about separating the signal from the noise, right?
Right.
Just because something is getting a lot of buzz doesn't mean it's right for you or your organization.
Precisely. It's about making informed decisions based on solid evidence, not just following the crowd.
So we've talked about scanning the landscape for change, making smart choices amidst all the uncertainty. But none of us are in this alone, right? Pereira brings it home in part 3 by diving into the power of teams and networks. This must resonate with your goals of building a really adaptable team.
It's fascinating how much the traditional idea of teamwork is evolving. Pereira talks about moving from conformity to diversity, from rigid hierarchies to more fluid networks. One of the things I find most compelling is his idea of pushing authority down.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually look like in practice?
It's about empowering people to make decisions at the point of information, rather than everything getting bottlenecked at the top. Instead of micromanaging, you create a culture where people closest to the work have the autonomy to act on their knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in a fast-paced environment. You don't want to be bogged down waiting for approvals from someone who's 3 levels removed from the actual problem.
Yeah.
It sounds like Pereira is advocating for more agile teams.
Exactly. And he even talks about reverse mentoring as a way to bridge generational gaps, junior team members mentoring senior folks. Imagine that.
That's brilliant. In a world where technology changes so quickly, who better to teach us about the latest trends than the people who grew up with them?
Right. It's a fantastic way to tap into those fresh perspectives and avoid getting stuck in our old ways.
Yeah.
Another shift Pereira highlights is moving from jobs to shared journeys. It's not enough to just offer people a paycheck anymore. People want to be part of something meaningful, something bigger than themselves.
That rings so true. People want to feel like their work has purpose, that they're making a real contribution. How do we create that sense of shared journey within our teams and organizations?
Pereira suggests connecting individual passions to the organization's mission. When people can see how their work directly contributes to something they care about, it's no longer just a job, it's a calling. And finally, he talks about moving from rigid rules to judgment. We can't rely on outdated rulebooks in a world that's constantly changing.
We need to empower our teams to think for themselves, give them guidelines and principles to make good decisions, but also the freedom to adapt and innovate.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating good judgment within our teams. Now, Pereira doesn't just stop at the boundaries of our immediate teams. He encourages us to ask the world to tap into external expertise and resources.
That makes sense. We can't possibly be experts in everything.
Exactly. He talks about embracing the sharing economy, moving away from ownership to shared access. Like we've seen with Uber and Airbnb, this can dramatically reduce costs and increase flexibility. And then there's the power of leveraging freelancers for specialized tasks.
Platforms like Upwork and Fiverr give us access to a global talent pool without the overhead of hiring full-time employees. It's like having a virtual team of experts on demand.
Exactly. And for really complex challenges, Pereira suggests crowdsourcing. Tapping into the collective intelligence of online communities can lead to unexpected and innovative solutions.
That's incredible. It's like the ultimate brainstorming session harnessing the power of the crowd.
He also emphasizes building a strong community, nurturing a network of shared interests and mutual support. It's about going beyond transactional relationships and creating a true ecosystem of collaboration.
So it's not just about finding the right people. It's about building meaningful relationships with them based on shared values and goals.
Precisely. And those relationships can lead to unexpected opportunities. Pereira reminds us not to underestimate the power of weak ties, those loose connections in our networks.
That's so true. Sometimes it's not the people we know best, but those we only connect with occasionally who offer the most novel insights or open doors to unexpected possibilities. Wow, this deep dive into disruption by design has been packed with actionable advice. It's not just about surviving disruption, but embracing it, leveraging it, even becoming a disruptor ourselves.
It's about challenging our assumptions, scanning the horizon for change, making bold choices, and building adaptable teams and networks. As Pereira says, the key is to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
To stay curious, stay agile, and stay ahead of the curve. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into disruption by design. We hope you surfaced with some valuable takeaways to help you navigate your own journey through disruption.